The country began to splinter. Fringe organisations grew on the left and the right. Even the Conservative Nationalist Party was disintegrating. In New South Wales, fear of Lang's policies caused a run on the State Savings Bank, closing its doors. Sir Robert Gibson delayed Commonwealth Bank support to teach the electorate the perils of government interference in the banking system.
Hey, Mum, would you mind if I tossed the towel in and gave Webster best?
Whatever you do, Dad, will be right with me. Of course, I would have felt proud going to church with you on Sunday. The new member's wife and all that. And everybody looking. But what should an old woman like me want with pride? Except what she has in her man and her children.
I'll rub it in.
Well, your friends will be sorry. But why should you care if they say you ratted on the party?
Ratted on the party?
Sit down, Dad. I haven't finished with you yet.
Ratted on the party? Me, ratted.
Joe Lyons was persuaded by a group of Melbourne businessmen to desert Labor and lead the Nationalists under a new name, the United Australia Party. 5 former Labor members joined him. The balance of power lay with the Lang faction. In November, the 5 Lang followers accused Theodore of pork barrelling in his Balmain electorate and voted with the opposition to bring the government down.
Now, this election has come very suddenly upon everyone. I can give you no better advice than to tune in with Britain. Trust the United Australia Party as the British people trusted the United British Party. Do as Britain did. The mad financial schemes and irresponsible actions of Mr. Lang smashed the great savings bank of New South Wales. I ask you, do you propose to give to Mr. Theodore, with his equally mad financial schemes, an opportunity to smash the whole banking system in Australia?
The only good news for Ted Theodore in 1931 was his acquittal in the long-delayed Mungana trial in Brisbane. 6,000 people cheered as he left the court, but his reputation was smeared forever.
He was standing on the back of a lorry, and it was a very, very volatile meeting, and then men were lurching out of the local pub and heckling him, but he could handle hecklers. It upset me, and I said to him afterwards, I must have been about 14, I think. I said, what were those people trying to do to you? And he said, oh, it's politics. But I said, what were they throwing things at you for? He was pretty good at ducking. But he said, oh, that's politics. He said, and anybody who goes in for politics without broad shoulders, Myra, is in the wrong job. He said, I can take it, don't worry, it's all right.
In the landslide that annihilated the Scullin government, Ted Theodore lost his seat to a Lang candidate. It was the end of his political career. Lang's party won only 3 seats. Lyons, the new Prime Minister, made it illegal for New South Wales to default on overseas loans. 2 months after opening the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Lang was sacked by the New South Wales Governor for defying the new federal law. He was never Premier again, but Labor remained split for a decade. Joe Lyons was to be Prime Minister throughout the 1930s. His government stuck to the Premier's plan, trusting in market forces to pull Australia out of depression. The predicted rise in investor confidence failed to eventuate. By 1933, 1 in every 3 Australian workers was out of a job.
We're then starting to organise the unemployed workers movement. We always organised demonstrations in the city. We always got bashings until we reorganised it to a Friday night demonstration when there was a shopping night and mixed go through Myers' and big stores and have a march through there. And it was very difficult to for the police to use the batons. Myers wasn't happy with them because some of the boys were picking up things as they went through, which was okay as far as we were concerned anyhow.
Organised by the Communist Party, the unemployed workers' movement campaigned against evictions and for a money dole. They forced governments to introduce paid relief work.
So he took his insults in silence, for this was the period when we lived in the Great Depression and nothing was cheaper than men. And we drove the shovels and swung the picks and cursed the choking dust. We'd wives and hungry kids to feed, so toil in the heat we must. And as the sun...
When my father got relief work, and my mother would do everything she could because he was the working man. Somehow or other she got some bacon, and I can remember my father sitting down to breakfast and there was eggs and bacon, and he said, "Millie, I can't eat this," with the children looking on. So my mother said, "Children, go outside while your father has his breakfast."
I was aware there was a depression, naturally, mainly because we had unemployed men coming to the door every day. And one morning I remember my father was up on the balcony as usual, and he spotted a vagrant asleep on the grass. My father just put his hand in his pocket and said, "Here, find yourself a bed somewhere else tonight. But don't tell all your mates, otherwise we'll have everybody lining up, sleeping on the lawn overnight. Don't tell anybody else."
For Ted Theodore, the end of politics was the making of his fortune. He had no trouble borrowing money to finance his own business. With Frank Packer, he founded the Women's Weekly and Consolidated Press. And with a consortium including John Wren, he struck it rich with Fiji gold. At the mines, he lived in a native hut and was made a chief, Ratu Edward. For most Australians, the 30s were wasted years, while they waited for world recovery to bring them work and a living wage.
We were working on the stone quarry as relief workers one winter's morning. About 9 o'clock in the morning, we saw men beginning to come through the town. We recognised them as workers from Pillarmain Colliery. Pillarmain miner had been killed. And we all swung round and looked at this bloke, Bluey Pearce, who was working relief work with us. He was the next man to go back into Pillarmain. And he'd go back because another man had been killed. That was the type of situation that we were involved in. You gained by somebody else dying.
Well, we didn't rely on market economics in order to pay for the war.
The full cabinet today directed the war cabinet to gazette the necessary regulations for the complete mobilization of all the resources, money, machinery, buildings, plants, whatever it may be.
In 1941, John Curtin's Labor government took control of the Australian economy. Everything was directed to the war effort. Taxation, forced savings, internal and external borrowing, rationing, price controls to stop inflation, and credit from the Commonwealth Bank.
Here was a job for bushman, carrier, wharfie, carpenter, welder, painter, engineer and clerk. A job for the mines, the mills and the foundries. And everything had to be quick.
With the outbreak of war, an endless stream of money poured into public works, creating a job for every man and woman able to work. Unemployment disappeared in Australia. The Great Depression was over. Theodore returned to public life in 1942 to set up the Allied Works Council. As director, Red Ted spent £1 million a week on public works. With victory in sight, he retired to Fiji. A serious heart condition forced him to return to Sydney in 1949.
We weren't a demonstrative family, but that day I had lost control. I just went over and put my arms around him and laid my cheek against his and didn't say anything. I hugged him. And then I had a beret on my head and he took it off and he started to twirl it around. I thought, oh, what's the matter? What's going on? His mind's going. I was very perturbed. But he was just playing for time, I think, because he said to me, Myra, I only have 3 days left. I'll be gone in 3 days. In 3 days, he was gone.
Theodore died in 1950. He was 65. 20 years earlier, he'd been vilified for supporting Keynes. But depression and war changed the views of economists and government. Full employment was now the goal of government economic policy.
People had just emerged from what was really 10 years of depression, because the depression started in 29 and went on till 39. So, and they were saying, never again, we aren't going to have that. We have to have a society in which we put employment right at the top of the ladder. In order to do that, you have to control the financial system. Now, that situation of controlling finance and controlling exchange rates really lasted until the 1970s. It lasted, you know, for quarter of a century, and that was the most prosperous period of world capitalism. And then around about that time, the financiers won out and the banks began to be deregulated and pressure began to deregulate exchange, and we've gone backwards since then in many ways. And this to me is a lesson that comes out of Theodore and Keynes particularly, that you have to be able to control the power of finance if you are going to have a decent, fair, humane, just economic system which provides full employment for people or anything close to it.
When your hair has turned to silver, I'll still be on the dole. I will live in Happy Valley, where the Reds have got control. I will draw the weekly ration and the child endowment too. And when I get the old age pension, I'll leave the rest to you.
They were too young to die. Their love for each other was greater than the political hate which tore their country apart. They were a real-life Romeo and Juliet, attempting to live and love in war-torn Sarajevo. Join us for next week's ABC special, Romeo and Juliet in Sarajevo, the story of the Bosnian conflict through the lives and deaths of two young people, next Wednesday at 8:30. Coming up, Sunset Boulevard, right after a news update.
We don't have